Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt like you weren't really being heard? You were speaking, but the other person was just waiting to reply, not to understand. Or maybe you were that person, hearing, but not listening, speaking, but not connecting. That's the moment I realized communication isn't just about words, it's about presence. And presence is what transforms a conversation into a connection. Let me take you back to a moment in my life that changed the way I speak, and more importantly, the way I listen. I was having a conversation with someone I deeply cared about. They were opening up, sharing something vulnerable, something real. But instead of holding space for them, my mind was racing. What should I say next? How can I fix this? What if I say the wrong thing? In that moment, I wasn't with them. I was with my own thoughts. And that's when it hit me. We lose so many chances to truly connect. Not because we don't love, not because we don't care, but because we're not fully present. Mindful communication is about more than talking slowly or thinking before we speak. It's about listening with our full being. ChatGPT said, "Have you ever noticed how you can be physically present in a room with someone, yet mentally miles away?" That's the difference between simply being there and truly being present. Communication in its most powerful form isn't just about speaking clearly or using the right words. It's about offering your full attention. So often, we think that if we're talking, we're communicating. But real communication begins when we offer the gift of presence. That means turning off the noise in our heads, putting down our phones, and leaning into the moment with another human being. When you're fully present, people can feel it. They feel safe. They feel safe. They feel seen. And that's when the walls start to come down. Most people don't just want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to feel like their words matter, their emotions are valid, and their experiences are real. But if we're thinking about what to say next, or distracted by something happening on the side, we lose that opportunity. We end up having surface-level interactions, and we miss the deeper truths that often exist between the words. Think about your most meaningful conversations. Weren't they the ones where someone looked you in the eye, listened without rushing you, and held space for whatever you needed to express? That's presence. That's mindful communication. When we speak from a place of true presence, we also become more intentional with our words. We stop talking just to fill silence. We speak to connect, to share, to uplift. And when we listen with presence, we allow others to feel that they're not alone, that their feelings aren't too much, or much, that their pain, their joy, or their confusion has a place to be held. This kind of communication creates deeper trust, stronger relationships, and more meaningful interactions in every area of life, whether it's between friends, partners, co-workers, or even strangers. Say, presence changes the tone of everything. Imagine sitting across from someone who is genuinely with you in every sense, not multitasking, not checking their watch, not mentally checking out. Just there. That's when people feel safe enough to open up. That's when vulnerability becomes possible. That's when healing begins. And it's not about being perfect or having all the right answers. It's about showing up fully, authentically, with your attention, your energy, your heart. In today's world, where attention is constantly being pulled in every direction, presence is one of the rarest and most valuable things we can offer someone. It's what turns an ordinary conversation into a moment of connection, and it reminds both people involved that something meaningful just happened here. And when we practice being present in small moments, really pausing, grounding ourselves, and looking someone in the eye, we start building the kind of communication that doesn't just speak to the mind, but speaks to the soul. We often underestimate the power of listening. In most conversations, people are not truly listening. They're waiting to speak, to share their side, to defend their view. This reactive way of communicating creates distance, misunderstanding, and emotional disconnection. Listening with intention, on the other hand, is one of the most powerful gifts we can give. It requires presence, empathy, and stillness. When we truly listen, not just with our ears, but with our full attention, we create space for others to be heard in a way that goes far deeper than surface-level communication. It's in that space that people begin to open up, to feel valued, to feel understood. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that speaking is power, that the louder we speak, the more we dominate a conversation, the more influence we have. But in truth, power often lies in our silence. in the ability to pause, to breathe, and to hear not just the words being said, but the feelings behind them. Intentional listening is not passive. It's an active, engaged choice. It's about tuning into someone's voice without rushing to respond. It's noticing the tone, the pauses, the energy behind what they're expressing. Often, what people say is only a fraction of what they're actually trying to communicate. It takes mindful listening to catch the rest. When we listen with intention, we give someone the experience of being fully seen. We signal to them that their emotions are valid, that we care not just about the facts, but about how those facts make them feel. That level of listening dissolves defensiveness. It invites honesty. It transforms the entire energy of the exchange. Even in moments of disagreement, when we listen to understand instead of preparing our counter-argument, the atmosphere softens. We shift from competition to compassion, from reaction to reflection, from conflict to connection. Listening this way also changes us. It humbles us. It reminds us that every person has a story, a struggle, a set of invisible battles we can't always see. And when we start to listen for what's not being said, the unshed tears behind a smile, the fear behind anger, the longing behind silence, we begin to respond differently. Our words become gentler, our advice more grounded, our presence more healing. And suddenly, communication is no longer about who's right or wrong. It becomes about creating understanding, safety, and trust. In a world where everyone is speaking, few are truly listening. But when you choose to be that person who listens with intention, who puts away distractions and focuses wholeheartedly on another human being, you stand out. You become a safe space, a mirror that reflects not judgment, but acceptance. And in doing so, you don't just improve your communication. You elevate the experience of every relationship in your life. You become someone who doesn't just hear people, but makes them feel heard. Silence often makes people uncomfortable. In conversations, we rush to fill the pauses, thinking that emptiness must mean awkwardness, that we've lost control or lost connection. But what if silence is not a gap, but a gateway? What if silence is where true understanding begins? In mindful communication, silence is not the absence of interaction. It is a powerful presence of awareness. It's in those quiet moments that we allow emotions to settle, thoughts to organize, and truths to emerge. We don't always need to have something to say. In fact, some of the most profound support we can offer is simply being there, quiet, attentive, and open. Think about the last time you were going through something heavy. Chances are, you didn't need someone to immediately respond, fix, or advise. You just needed someone to hold space, to sit with you in the weight of what you were feeling, to be still with you. That is the gift of silence. It shows up not to fix the pain, but to honor it. It says, I'm not here to rush you through this. I'm here to walk beside you. In that space, healing begins. Trust deepens. And what may have been impossible to express in words starts to find its voice. Silence also invites reflection. In conversations where we allow pauses to exist, we create a space for others to think more clearly, to express more deeply, and to feel safe while doing it. When we rush to respond, we often cut off the very thoughts that were just about to be born. But when we allow space between their words and our response, we're saying, I respect your process. I'm not here to hurry you along. That kind of silence is powerful. It's intentional and full. It's filled with respect and presence. In emotionally charged moments, silence becomes even more valuable. It gives us a chance to regulate ourselves, to ground our emotions before we speak. Rather than reacting in anger or frustration, we can pause, breathe, and then choose a response that aligns with our values rather than our impulses. Silence becomes the bridge between emotion and wisdom. And when we use it wisely, it transforms conflict into clarity and tension into calm. Silence is also a form of deep listening. When someone shares something painful and we don't rush to fill the air with solutions, we communicate through our stillness. I hear you. I'm with you. You don't have to pretend or explain. That kind of listening creates a sacred space, one where vulnerability feels safe and welcome. And that's where true connection happens. In a noisy world that's always pushing us to speak more, react faster, and stay busy, choosing silence becomes a radical act of mindfulness. It's a way of saying, this moment deserves more than noise. It deserves presence. And in those quiet moments, people often find the courage to say what they really mean, or the peace to feel what they've been avoiding. Emma, that's the kind of space where hearts open, not because of what was said, but because of what was felt in the silence. Go is one of the most subtle barriers in communication. It often disguises itself as confidence, as logic, as the need to be right. But when we communicate from ego, we're not connecting, we're performing. We listen not to understand, but to prepare our next line. We speak not to connect, but to convince. This kind of interaction builds walls instead of bridges. It turns communication into competition, where the goal becomes winning the argument instead of understanding the heart. But when we shift our focus from ego to compassion, everything begins to change. And we stop asking, how can I prove my point? And start asking, how can I understand yours? Compassion softens the edges of our communication. It reminds us that the person in front of us is not just an opinion. They're a whole human being, shaped by experience, pain, joy, fear, and hope. When we communicate with compassion, we're no longer speaking from a place of superiority, but from a place of shared humanity. We see ourselves in others, and others in ourselves. That recognition alone allows us to pause before reacting, to listen before responding, and to speak with kindness even in moments of disagreement. One of the most powerful shifts happens when we stop trying to win conversations, because in real connection, no one loses. Face. Humble. You don't have to be right to be understood, and you don't have to agree to respect someone's experience. Compassion allows us to hold space for difference without letting that difference turn into distance. It says, I may not feel what you feel, but I honor that you feel it. That kind of validation heals more than advice ever could. When we let go of ego, we also become more curious. We stop assuming and start asking. We're no longer focused on defending our identity, but on learning about another's. That curiosity leads to discovery, and that discovery leads to deeper connection. Conversations become less about proving and more about exploring, less about pushing and more about receiving. This shift doesn't just change how we speak to others. It transforms how we speak to ourselves. We begin to recognize when our inner voice is driven by fear or insecurity, and we gently redirect it with compassion. That same practice shows up in our relationships. We become slower to judge, quicker to forgive. We replace sarcasm with sincerity, interruption with interest, and criticism with care. The tone of our conversations changes, not because we learned better techniques, but because we started operating from a different intention. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to choose compassion over ego. And while ego isolates, compassion unites. Ego demands to be heard, but compassion listens. Ego reacts, compassion responds. Ego wants to win, compassion wants to understand. And that shift, small, subtle, but powerful, creates space for real connection. It turns conversations into safe places and disagreements into doorways for growth. Not because we say everything perfectly, but because we say it with the right heart. We often think that communication is all about what we say, the words we choose, or the tone we use. But a huge part of what we communicate actually comes through what we don't say. Our body language, facial expressions, eye contact, and even the stillness in our presence can speak volumes. Sometimes, these nonverbal cues communicate more honestly than our words ever could. You can say, I'm listening, but if your eyes are wandering, your body is turned away, or your phone is in your hand, the message doesn't land. People feel disconnection, not just through words, but through energy. And when our verbal and non-verbal communication aren't aligned, trust slowly begins to break down. Think of the last time someone looked you in the eyes while you were speaking, truly looked, without checking their watch or glancing at their phone. That moment likely felt different, like you mattered, like you were the only one in the room. That's the power of non-verbal connection. It tells the other person, I'm here fully with you. It's a message that needs no words, yet carries the deepest reassurance. When we learn to become aware of our body language, how we sit, where we face, how we breathe, we start to communicate more intentionally, even in silence. A simple gesture, a nod, a soft gaze, a relaxed posture can create safety. It invites openness. It encourages the other person to keep speaking, to go deeper, to trust that they're being received without judgment. On the other hand, crossed arms, fidgeting, or constantly looking away can silently shut down the conversation. It might not be intentional, but the message is still received. I'm not really with you. That's why mindful communication means being conscious of both what we say and how we show up physically. Every part of us is part of the message. Even our tone carries more than just sound. It carries emotion. A soft, patient tone says I care even when we don't have the perfect words. A harsh, rushed tone says I'm too busy even when we're saying kind things. Our energy speaks before we do, and it lingers long after the conversation ends. When we speak with genuine warmth, when we hold eye contact with kindness, when we sit still and breathe deeply while someone is speaking, we're sending silent messages that build trust, safety, and love. In difficult conversations especially, our non-verbal communication becomes even more important. When emotions are high and words can easily be misunderstood, it's the calm in our voice, the stillness in our posture, and the gentleness in our eyes that keep the connection alive. People remember how we made them feel far more than what we said. And often, how we made them feel came through our presence, our energy, our quiet signals. Mindful communication doesn't stop at what we say. It's about how we hold space for others, how we show up with our whole being, and how we let our actions echo the intention behind our words. When we align our body, mind, and heart in our interactions, every gesture becomes an act of love, every silence becomes an invitation, and every conversation becomes an opportunity for connection. Mindful communication isn't about having perfect words or flawless timing. It's about being present, intentional, and compassionate in how we connect with others. When we choose to listen with our full attention, when we allow silence to hold space, when we lead with compassion instead of ego, and when our non-verbal cues align with our true intention, we create conversations that don't just exchange words. They build trust, heal wounds, and deepen relationships. In a world that moves fast and speaks loud, the most powerful communication often comes from a calm presence, a listening heart, and a willingness to truly understand.